Some of the loneliest people are never alone. They're the ones in crowded rooms, at dinners, at parties, smiling, nodding, engaging, but leaving with a quiet emptiness they can't explain. Today, we're talking about the psychology of people who feel lonely in a full room, and why connection can be missing even when company isn't. Loneliness isn't about being alone. Loneliness is often misunderstood. People assume it's about isolation, about having no one around. But loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of feeling seen. You can be in a crowded room and still feel invisible, because connection isn't proximity. It's resonance. Why this loneliness feels so confusing. This kind of loneliness is especially painful because it's hard to explain. If you say you're lonely, people respond with, "But you're always with people. You have friends. You're never alone." And that makes the loneliness feel invalid. So instead of talking about it, people internalize it. They wonder, what's wrong with me that I feel this way when I shouldn't? The mask of social functioning. Many people who feel lonely in a full room are socially capable. They know how to make conversation, read the room, laugh at the right moments, keep things light. They function well socially. But functioning isn't the same as connecting. Social skill can become a mask that hides emotional distance. Why depth feels risky. For many, this pattern comes from learning early that depth wasn't safe. Maybe your emotions were dismissed, your vulnerability was met with discomfort, or being too much led to rejection. So you learned to stay on the surface, to talk but not reveal, to engage but not expose. Over time, shallow connection became the norm, and deep connection began to feel dangerous. The role of emotional self-containment. People who feel lonely in a full room often learned to contain themselves. They don't share what's heavy. They don't bring up what's real. Not because they don't want to, but because they've learned it changes the energy. So they protect the room by shrinking themselves, and slowly, invisibility sets in. Why they feel like observers. You'll often hear people describe this feeling as, "I feel like I'm watching life happen." They're present, but not participating emotionally. They listen more than they speak. They notice more than they share. They're inside the room, but outside the moment. This observer role feels safer. It doesn't require exposure, but it also blocks connection. The subtle fear of burdening others. Another hidden layer is fear. Fear that sharing will make things awkward. Being honest will dampen the mood. Vulnerability will feel like a burden. So they keep things neutral. They don't want to be the reason the energy shifts. But real connection requires energy shifts. Why this loneliness feels worse than being alone. Ironically, this kind of loneliness can feel worse than physical solitude. Because when you're alone, the reason is clear. But when you're surrounded and still lonely, it feels like a personal failure. It creates the belief, if I'm here and I still feel this way, then the problem must be me. That belief quietly erodes self-worth. The relationship with emotional safety. At its core, this loneliness is about safety. Feeling seen requires trust, vulnerability, emotional risk. If your nervous system learned that connection came with consequences, it will choose distance, even when you crave closeness. The room feels full, but safety feels absent. Why small talk becomes exhausting. For people experiencing this, small talk isn't neutral. It's draining. Not because they dislike people, but because surface interaction feels like pretending. They leave social settings feeling tired, not energized, because they were present physically, but absent emotionally. How this pattern shows up in relationships. Even in close relationships, this loneliness can persist. They may avoid difficult conversations, keep emotional needs vague, feel misunderstood without speaking up. Their partner might think, they're fine, they never say anything's wrong. But silence doesn't mean contentment. It often means uncertainty about being accepted. What healing actually looks like. Healing doesn't start by becoming louder. It starts by becoming slightly more honest, sharing one real thought, naming one emotion, letting one moment be imperfect. Connection grows through risk, but it doesn't require oversharing, just authenticity. A final thought. If you've ever felt lonely in a full room, it doesn't mean you're ungrateful, broken, or disconnected. It means you learned how to belong without being fully known. But true belonging doesn't come from fitting in. It comes from being seen, even when that feels uncomfortable. And sometimes, the room doesn't need more people. It needs more honesty.
When the room feels safer than being seen. There's a reason this loneliness doesn't disappear even when you're around the right people. Because for many, the room itself feels safer than being truly seen. Being present without revealing feels predictable, controlled. But being seen requires risk. It means letting someone notice your pauses, your uncertainty, your unspoken thoughts. And if your past taught you that being noticed came with consequences, your nervous system learned to stay subtle, to blend in without disappearing. Why you feel more yourself when you're alone. For many, solitude feels relieving, not because they dislike people, but because they don't have to perform. Alone, there's no monitoring tone, managing expressions, adjusting reactions. That relief is a clue. It tells you the loneliness isn't about isolation. It's about the exhaustion of self-editing. If you've ever felt lonely in a full room, it doesn't mean you don't belong. It means you've been present without being seen. And the moment you stop asking, do I fit here? And start asking, can I be myself here? And sometimes, the connection you're waiting for starts the moment you stop hiding the parts of you that were never meant to be hidden.